Hi guys. Hello to everyone. This is Aditya Gurudanti. I am the Associate Director and Head of Stirrup Sustainability Services, Stirrup ESG Solutions, Stirrup Sustainability Advisory. We are still between names, but the fact of matter still stays that Stirrup as an organization has been there for around 2 decades. The organization has been doing integrated reporting and um, corporate reporting, and those kind of stuff. I have joined around 4 or 5 months back as of now. Before this, I was heading ESG for Lupin, and before with which I was with Sustainability Operations Dr. Reddy's. Overall, I have around 1.5 decade worth of experience in sustainability, and I am a climate risk expert. Was a climate risk expert 3 years back. Since then, I've been working around in sustainability. Um, there are people. Should I start with the presentation? How does it work out?
Yes, Aditya, you may go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just start. Sorry. Yes, ma'am, and this. So today I was told that we will be talking about climate risk 101. That's the name and the session, building smarter responses through frameworks. That's what I'm talking about. So this is quite a small presentation. This will maybe take around 20 minutes of our time, 20-25 minutes of our time. The rest of the time, I would I would sincerely ask all the participants to ask questions, spend time on thinking about what this is, and how do we actually use it in our everyday business. I'm putting on a slideshow. I hope the slideshow is visible to everyone. Can someone just give me a small?
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
wonderful. So this is the first time I'm doing this workshop or this session ever for Climate Connect and Global Shapers. So frankly, I don't know the protocol here. I'm not sure what happens generally. I know the subject, but I actually don't know the people here. So can somebody just give me a download of what kind of people? So Sagar gave me a basic telling saying that these everybody here is passionate about sustainability. They have around 2 to 3 years experience in sustainability and are looking to build up a career there. That's pretty much I have.
Yes, and if anybody wants to quickly, one or two cohorts, if they want you to give your introduction to Aditya.
Sorry.
So Aditya, just to divide the cohort, we have like 4 categories. We have people who are interested in climate policy, people who are interested in climate communications, people who are interested in climate finance, and people who are interested in sustainability consulting. So you are addressing folks who are from these 4 broad domains.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so there are people who know about these stuff, right? So they know what is climate risk, or at least they have a hang of it. So I'll just breeze through the major definitions and that sort of stuff as just breeze through it, or should I just go in depth? That's the only reason I'm asking for the people who are present with us.
Fellows, you can unmute and you can just answer if you want, or else Aditya, if it's possible, I think you can briskly go over the PPTs and we can directly have the questions on the chat, which the moderators can put it up with you and we can go through those, given like we have a shortage in time as well.
Okay, sure, works for me. See, guys, the people who are with us here today, uh, if there is a chance, see, generally webinars works in all ways and shapes and sizes. So if there is a place where you can unmute and talk, I'll sincerely urge you to do that, because if there is something which I'm talking about which doesn't make sense to you, or you need more in depth, because I'm covering these things on a on a bird's eye view kind of a level. I'm not going in depth about any of these things, because if I do that, then we will be just sitting here around until we have our dinner. I prefer to talk that until we have our dinners, but frankly, there are others, and there are a lot of other subjects which needs to be covered. So I'll be going at it from a very high level. If there are issues, if there is any kind of a clarification you need, please do stop me. Once I get into the flow, I am not able to see everybody here on the screen. That's the limitation of a VC. So I'm just talking to my laptop, which is 13 or 14 inch. So please feel free to stop me if there is need for a more in-depth clarification. Yeah. These are the things which we will be covering. We'll be talking about climate risk. We'll be talking about the financial impacts the climate risks have. We'll be talking about risk taxonomy. How does in a traditional strategic risk taxonomy or enterprise risk taxonomy, where does climate risk sit in, and what kind of risks will be there? What are the general impacts of a climate risk? Scenario analysis. What do we mean by scenario analysis? What kind of scenario analysis we do for analyzing the climate risk? And case studies. There are a couple of case studies. Have the things which are presented on the slide are just a food for thought. There is a lot of things which I will talk as I take the session. So from the get-go, before even we get into it, I think let us take a step back and understand risk. Risk, or the word risk or opportunity, generally talks about the future perspective, a future positive or a future negative from a lens. So if I'm talking about financial risk, then the risk of losing of money, or if I'm talking about business risk, then risk of interruption of business. If I'm talking about, maybe I'll say arbitrage risk under financial risk, then I'll be talking about what would arbitrage risk or opportunity. Generally, the risk analysts have a bad habit of always attaching the word risk to every word. But whenever we say risk, it also means an opportunity along. So if I'm talking about an arbitrage risk, there I also might be an arbitrage opportunity. So if, let us say, if I have maybe a couple of 100 crores which have to be billed from US, and if, let us say, I gave the service or the product maybe 6 or 7 months back, or let us say 5 months back, and if the dollar rate is increasing or decreasing, then that's the arbitrage risk I am talking about, or arbitrage opportunity I'm talking about. Organizations will play to it to see if they can get that money later or sooner, depending upon how does the conversions play out. So that's one risk or opportunity. Risk or opportunity. There is something in the chat. Should I look at in the chat? Oh, okay. Similarly, if I'm talking about climate risk is more long drawn. So we are talking about the important or the positive or negatives of climate from from a organizational or from a societal perspective. We all know that climate risk, when we say climate risk, or the risk of changing climate, the essentially the word climate risk essentially means that the risk or opportunities which are arising out of changing climate, due to which how should we or how should the businesses position themselves. The risks can come to businesses, the risks can come to society, of course to the environment. That's the reason there is a climate risk. Climate related opportunities are potentially the business models which are there, where a few businesses can actually gain out of the climate risks which are coming up, at the same time can also have some amount of potential new business models which can be around the efforts to adapt or mitigate to the climate change. Risks are generally in all flavors. It can be a physical risk, it can be a transition risk, it can be acute, it can be chronic. We will talk about these words in the subsequent slide. But generally, when we say climate risk, a climate risk is is long term. So we talk about 2030, we talk about 2040, we talk about 2050. And how does the changing climate at that place where the business is actually working would impact that businesses or that organization's models or way of working. So for an example, if I say that there is a real estate company which is trying to build something in Chennai, then a physical climate risk, the climate risk of having a drought or a famine for Chennai, is significantly higher. So a real estate company would actually have to look at those kind of risks 5 or 10 years down the line. If they are building a high rise, then that high rise will potentially stay for next 5 or 10 years. Then how would Chennai as a city would be seen after 10 years, due to water, lack of water? Would people move out, or due to high floods, would people stay away from specific areas? So those kind of topics and conversations the organizations need to have before investing in long drawn assets and long drawn projects. Similarly, there are also transition risks. So okay, let me just come to the next one. The overall climate risks come in both physical and transition risks. it. And arrow options. No. So I think there is a pointer thing I keep forgetting. So on one side of it, you can see the risks and opportunities slide. In the risk side, you can see the transition risks and the physical risks. So overall climate risks generally are divided into physical risks. In transition risks and physical risks. Physical risks are the risks which are coming due to a physical activity, due to a physical calamity. Transition risks are coming due to the changing tastes or changing pestle factors, political, economic, social, and technological factors due to changing climate. There is a small kind of a pull-push kind of a thing here, because if we need to adapt or if we need to mitigate climate change or if we need to even adapt to climate change, we need to take policy decisions from get-go, from today itself. Those policy decisions, those technological decisions, or even those market decisions can be a cause of a risk to the organization. And if those transition risks aren't there, let us say we don't want to mitigate to climate change, we don't want to adapt to climate change, we want to stay as usual, then the chance of having a physical calamity or a natural calamity down the line is high. So physical and transition risks actually play a kind of a seesaw. So if we need to be very, very balanced there, if we go full blown on transition, then what happens is that the transition risks, the policy and the technological risks which the business faces would be immense, while we would be fairly better off in a calamity world, or we won't have that kind of a calamities. But if we are not doing that, if we just play it down and we say that status as usual, or if we go full blown fossil fuel, then the chance of having a higher physical risk will increase down the line. So I hope you are able to appreciate that seesaw, because if we just go one side, then other side gets very, very badly affected. Similarly, on the other side, there are also opportunities which are coming due to transit, due to the climate change which is happening. As the climate changes, as the rainfall patterns changes, as the what should I say, the fossil fuel driven growth requirement changes, the opportunities also come. The opportunities from the terms of resource efficiency, in terms of having products and services which are more aligned to a changing climate, trying to make the businesses more and more resilient. So these are the opportunities which are there. So when we talk about climate risk, we also talk about those opportunities. A simple example would be for an organization, if they want to reduce their, let us say, scope 2 emissions, and if they have taken a goal that they will go for solar power, or they will have solar rooftop, or they will buy wind power from captive power plants, the independent power producers, then that would also mean that their dependency on fossil fuel growth or fossil fuel kind of an energy is reducing. So they need not buy power from a traditional power plant in principle. So that would also improve the energy security of that organization. And that's an opportunity which we can look at. And today, even by business models also, renewable energy, the price of renewable energy is actually lower than a traditional energy, or brown energy. So actually, when you're if the organization is transitioning itself to a more solar driven or a wind power driven organization, it is one, improving the energy security, two, reducing the cost of energy. And that's an opportunity which is there, which abates the transition risk, where they have to actually remove themselves or reduce their dependence on fossil fuels. Both these risks and opportunities require immense amount of strategic planning and risk management. We cannot just go very what should I say, single faceted into this, and we cannot say that, yeah, let us just go full blown on green products. An organization cannot come out and say that, let us say a cement organization cannot come out and say that, yeah, from tomorrow onwards I won't produce any OPC at all, I will only produce BPC, PSC, and maybe GGBS, or maybe geopolymer cements. If they say that, then of course, yeah, from uh, opportunity perspective, they are catering, or they are capturing all the opportunities which are available. But from a risk perspective, the market might not be ready entirely there. And from a risk perspective, they might be hitting themselves even harder. That risk planning has to be there even before we think about any kind of such implications. That risk planning eventually flows to the financial impact. Generally, when we say climate risk analysis, that generally starts with a ESG or a sustainability risk, and then we identify that whether a climate risk is actually a risk for that organization or not. There are many industries, there are few subsectors where a physical climate risk isn't much of an issue, frankly. If I'm talking about maybe just on top of my mind, if I'm talking about deep sea, maybe. So deep sea, acute climate risk might not be that much of a concern. Chronic might not that be of that much of a concern. Acute physical risk can be that much of a concern. But for deep sea, I don't think a chronic physical risk might be that much of a concern, and they need not spend their time. But on the flip side, if there is a petrochemical plant, or if there is a fertilizer plant, or even if there is a services organization, for them, these risks might be more relevant. The financial impact of a climate risk or climate risks or opportunities will define how does that risk gets positioned in the entire enterprise risk level. In an enterprise risk, if it is a strategic risk, then of course people pay attention to it. If it is an operational risk, people pay attention to it. But if it is more of an awareness topic, if it's more of an engagement topic, where they just need to understand that this is something which they need to know, but not really focus on, then all these discussions doesn't actually come into play. But that decision has to be taken through analysis, through actual scenario planning to see what is their overall impact. Without which we can't even know should they have an adaptation plan, or should they have a mitigation plan, or should they even bother about these opportunities or not. Let me just go to the other one. So this is just a climate impact. I've just posted it as a small, what should I say, a reminder of the kind of climate impacts or the impact climate change has. This is 2022's data from German Watch. German Watch publishes a climate risk report every couple of years. They have published a new one, 2025 one, very recently. I would urge all the people present here to go through it. It's a very good report. Per 2022's data, as far as the present data goes, we see that there is a huge amount of impact of climate change on many countries. Losses of GDP per se, or if I'm talking about losses to businesses per se, even fatalities per se, there's a huge amount of loss of economic value due to climate change. There's a huge amount of loss of life due to climate change. Of course, loss of life is immeasurable. We cannot come out and say what would be the risk of losing a life or not losing a life. Let us not go there. But even if I'm talking purely from a business sense also, the amount of economic value which the countries are losing due to change in the climate is immense. Due to the change in the climate, if I'm giving you a very simple example, I was visiting a few farm areas down in Punjab, in the southern Punjab. I was working with Punjab State Pollution Control Board. There were a few engagements there. We could see that the desertification of Punjab is happening very slowly. I'm not saying it's happening very rapidly and there will be a before and after photo, but the desertification of Punjab fields is happening very slowly, but it is happening. It is happening very, what should I say, resiliently, or it is happening very slowly, but it is happening very majorly. The rainfall patterns have changed, due to which the amount of food which can be generated in those so-called fertile lands of Punjab has actually reduced. And that has actually caused the farmers to have an economic disadvantage, which has eventually again led them to not use advanced techniques for stubble management. Scratching a match and burning the stubble is the most easiest thing to do, and they are doing it because they are saying that the MRSP which I'm receiving for my own plants or for my own crop is not economically advantageous for me. On one side, it's a triple whammy. One side, I'm getting hit by my own production. Second time, I am getting hit by the MSP of the government. And third, you expect me to manage my stubble in a more judicious way. I can't do that. I'll scratch a match and I'll get biochar free for my field. And that is actually aggravating the problem again. So that's a vicious cycle. Similarly, if I'm talking about Chennai, or if I'm talking about even Vizag, when I was with our Dr. Reddy's, we were doing climate risk analysis. We found out that the risk of many of our plants along the coastlines is actually increasing. We had to invest more in insurance for those assets at that places. And that would mean that so much amount of money, which otherwise would have been invested in my business growth or even in my bonuses for the teams, has gone in increase of my insurance payments. And that money is just sitting there. to mitigate the risk, or just to abate that risk which might or might not come. So my point is, the risk or the impact of climate change on business is very, very real. It's felt. The only thing which businesses need help with is to understand it better, to calculate it objectively, and present it to the management, saying that this is something which we need to be very either worried about or not worried about. Let us take an objective call, post the analysis, and see whether this is something which we should talk about or we shouldn't talk about. But whatever it is, take an objective decision. Many of the organizations struggle there. And that's where climate risk analysts and climate change, climate risk experts, those people come into play. This sect of climate risk analysts who are there, they generally help the organization understand the climate impact in their countries, in their situations, in their future business models. If a fertilizer company is trying to diversify itself into a green energy company, then what would be the kind of climate risks which that company would have to see from a green energy standpoint is also something which the organization has to take care. Sometimes these numbers creep in, add up slowly, and come to a much bigger level. There are places where it doesn't. I have been part of both such kind of discussions. There was a place where I was working with a major global pharma organization, where we did a lot of analysis, spent a lot of time and resources, and then we found out that the percentage of financial impact of the climate change for that organization would be less than 2% of the overall market cap. And it was a good thing we had kept it in our emerging risks. It's about 4 or 5 years back. We had kept it in the emerging risk side, but we actually couldn't spend time and effort as a strategic risk for us. While on the other side, I have been part of climate risk discussions for integrated steel plant, where we found out that the climate risk is actually huge and they need to actually understand and work around. Climate risks and the risk taxonomy, the way in which generally a risk taxonomy for an industry is placed is there are financial risks, there are business risks, then there are ESG risks which are coming up today. But generally there are business and financial risks which companies talk about. The entire gamut of risks which will have a direct impact on the bottom line, either increasing the cost or reducing the revenue eventually in the next 3 to 5 years, or in the next 1 to 5 years, are generally called as financial risks. Anything which can disrupt the business or which can hamper the business as usual are generally called as business risks. Physical chronic climate risk, physical acute climate risk, and transition climate risk, actually all the three plays on all the two. Depending upon what kind of risk I am talking about, they play on both physical and business as well as financial risks. Losing the bottom line or losing the revenue or increase of cost for a risk is just one aspect of the risk. But if I'm talking about entirely on a separate gamut of things, if I'm talking about supply chain disruption, or if I'm talking about things like maybe people not able to work due to hot summer days, those kind of risks are business risks. Of course, there is a financial impact to it. People are losing, the organization is losing the productivity and maybe losing some amount of revenue there, but more from a business side of things, it's danger to the way in which the business is being done. If I'm not able to use my workforce, let us say if I'm a consulting organization, and if I cannot send my consultants out to Jaipur or out to maybe Madhya Pradesh in the peak of summer because that's a health danger for them, then my way of conducting business for those clients from Rajasthan or from Madhya Pradesh have to be very, very different. If the organization expects me, if let us say Welspun is there, or let us say Trident is there, and Trident expects me to be there in person to do energy audit, and I cannot do it in peak of summer because that's dangerous for my team, then I'll have to either take a rain check on it and say that I cannot do it, or I have to invent new ways to actually do the energy audit there without actually being physically present. So either ways I have to think about. And that's the change in which I do the business, or the way in which I would do the business is changing there. And that's the major business risks which are presented out of all these climate risks. I know I'm going a bit fast because I joined a bit late, but I hope there are not many questions because I'm not seeing any interruptions. Climate risk for business comes in all flavors. Supply chain disruptions, I talked about it. Any kind of, let us say, if my supply chains, if there are international supply chains, and if there is a risk of flooding, or if there is a risk of cyclones in my supply chain, in my logistics links, then I need to wait, or I need to account for that disruption. And when I say I need to account for that, either I need to put more of that material in my warehouse, thus increasing my warehouse cost and my dead inventory, or I have to account for that risk by saying that yeah, I will have multiple supply chains for the same commodity, which will actually put me in a sadder negotiation position. Many of the organizations do that. There are many people who today, many supply chains look at what should I say, the supply chain disruptions from a climate risk standpoint. What they say is that instead of having only one L1, where I will do 100% of the business and make that potential partner more strong, I will do a maybe a 60-20-20 or a 70-15-15 kind of a breakup for that L1, L2, and L3, where these three people are there and all three people will deliver to me on their set percentages, so that if one person or one supplier is not able to supply due to any kind of a supply chain disruption, the second one will take over. That is the supply chain de-risking strategy. One of the major reasons people go for it is so that they don't need to depend on one supplier throughout. But today, climate risks and the issues with non-compliance, issues with that organization not able to deliver due to physical climate risks, or the logistics issues, or even transition risks, is increasing drastically. So that is adding on more pressure for the supply chain individuals or the supply chain management professionals of the organization to find more L3s or L4s who are aligned to the climate risk expectations. And that puts the supply chain of the organization under tremendous pressure because they are not able to negotiate. So maybe they will be buying things at a tad higher cost, or they might be buying things at a lesser bad payment terms. And that might impact the business's bottom line again. Higher cost of operations from an insurance standpoint, I have told you. Many organizations are increasing the insurances for their assets. Actually, that's a point in many ratings also today. Many ESG ratings today are asking for this question that due to climate change, have you increased your insurance cost? Have you increased your liabilities anywhere? Those questions are coming. Sales decrease is more from a transition risk perspective. People generally, a general customer not buying a ICE car is a sales decrease, but buying an EV car, people prefer, or generally EV cars are generally termed as greener, per se, greener with a double inverted commas, because I did LCS, at least I did LCS 3 years back for major EVs, and we found out that for a general use case of 30-35 kilometers a day and maybe a 50,000 kilometers lifetime, a ICE car is almost as good as an EV, because EV has a huge amount of impacts in its own design and its own manufacturing stage. Battery toxicity is still very higher. The electricity which is being used to charge the car is still not as green as we would like to be. Today, our emission factor is what, 0.69 or 0.7? That's still not at a level where we would expect that the energy which is coming to our houses is actually greener. So the EV is termed as green, it's advertised as green. That might cause a loss to the ICE car business. While we know amongst ourselves that that's more of a market positioning and that's a transition risk. Similarly, policy risks, nations asking for scrapping down of old cars because they will be inefficient and thus they might cause more scope 1 emissions. That's a policy risk, which is textbook policy climate risk and a transition climate risk. Similarly, regulatory risks. The amount of regulatory oversight on these things is also increasing because individual countries have their own net zero goals and individual countries have their own physical climate risk adaptation and mitigation plans. India has a mitigation plan. India has an adaptation plan. We have our net zero 2070 goal. And we also have a lot of green hydrogen missions on those kind of things. So from a regulatory standpoint, also the business landscape is more conducive for a greener or a more, what should I say, a less carbon intensive way of doing things. And that would mean that if my business is a more carbon intensive business, then that might take a hit from a regulatory standpoint. Case in point, cement. That's in principle a more carbon intensive business. There's no way around that. But many of the climate cement organizations are actually taking a hit because the regulatory landscape is not very conducive there. You can't just get a high amount of thermal energy from municipal solid waste or from greener side, which can put 1400 degrees into the kiln. Second, from a customer standpoint, cement is a commodity business. So even if I want to abide by all the regulations and I want to abide by all the international conventions and I want to make a greener cement, which is the best in the landscape and lowest in the carbon emission spectrum, at the end of the day, my customer might or might not actually have that differentiation. We work with a lot of cement plants. Many of them say the same thing. For me, it's just about relationships. My distributors or my customers don't actually care whether it is a PSC cement or a PPC cement. They are at the end asking for the strength. They are asking for the duration period. And they just pretty much go with the brand which they have been using. So if KCP says that I'm putting my OPC cement since 20 years, they will still buy the OPC cement. They don't mind if they need a PSC cement or not. They don't mind paying extra for the PSC cement by some amount, maybe around 510 rupees per bag. But in that 510 rupees, can I actually make enough profit that I can actually make a PSC or a Portland slag cement a more, what should I say, a profitable business case for KCP or not? As of today, it's a very dangerous thing. It can happen in the next 5 years, but today I cannot advise a cement organization to go full-blown steam on all green cements because market is not ready for it. But on the other side, the regulations are actually pushing for it. So these organizations are in that fix if you see that. Scenario analysis. Oh, sorry. I think I've taken a lot of time. Sagar or Pusaka, are you there?
Yes, Aditya. So maybe in 2 minutes, if we can wrap this up, because there are questions in the chat that for you.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. So this was the meet. Sorry, guys. I think this will answer one of the questions on the chat. Climate scenario analysis generally is done by a climate risk analysis starts with scenario analysis. The first question what we tend to ask ourselves is, where do we want to see our business in 2040, 2050? What kind of a temporal and what kind of a business scenario are we looking at? Temporal is quite easy to answer. I need to do my analysis for 2040, let us say. 2040 is the timeline. 2050 is one more timeline. Okay, 2040, 2050 done. Then I'm asking the next question to myself is, how will the world move? So these SSP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are there, or RCPs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which were there earlier, or RCP 2.6, sorry, 8.5, 2.6, and those things which were there earlier are ballpark parallel, but those are the pathways the world would take under different instances. For example, SSP 1 is the sustainability pathway for taking the green road. Like all the policies, all the regulatory landscape, market landscape, everything would be conducive for low carbon and reducing the emissions. In that way, what happens is that the emissions at 2050 might actually reduce. Our global warming might actually come back. Today we have crossed 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees. There's a very high probability, but maybe we can reverse it. Maybe all the countries in the world can come together and say that we are making a policy decision that we don't want to invest in any fossil fuel technologies. We want to reduce our emissions by a drastic amount, and we will fund for that. So from tomorrow onwards, we can start with SSP 1 and say that, Ki boss, my emissions will reduce by 2050. In that case, the organizations need not plan for so much amount of mitigation and adaptation, because actually the global warming might stay at that level as we are today in 2025, or might reduce also. On the flip side of it, on the other side is SSP 5, which is a fossil fuel development, where we are saying that all the policies, all the things which we have built up until now, let us say things like the green hydrogen mission or things like net zero goals, whatever we have in our country or throughout the world, or UNFCCC's goals, we will just scrap everything and then start using fossil fuel for our economic growth. In a way, somewhat the countries might be going that way, but I'm quite optimistic that they are not going to SSP 5. In that case, what would happen is that our emissions will shoot up drastically. And the challenge to mitigate is very, very high. There is no point of mitigation per se. We cannot stop it. So the only thing which we can do is adapt. as much as possible, adapt for the changing scenario. And then organizations will just focus on adaptation. They will just focus on removing their units from a more climate riskier places like coastlines or plateaus, and they might go more interior. They might go to places where water is available, and so on and so forth. SSP3 on the other side is regional rivalry. This is one of the most likely scenarios, because individual countries will have their individual calls and they can play around with it. These policies would be more focused on individual or country level securities rather than a global focus. So the world is not united, as might say. SSP1 world is united on entire green policies. SSP5 the entire world is united that we won't use any climate technologies, and we will just go full blown on full steam on fossil fuel. SSP3 is the middle of the road, where actually there will be a lot of regional rivalry. And this is one of the most probable scenarios, as well as this is one of the this is the scenarios where the organizations have to battle between mitigation and adaptation like crazy, because the policies keep changing. On one side, at the same time, the emissions are also increasing, not at SSP5 level, but at a lower level, but not so happy that the emissions are falling. So they still need to plan for adaptation. They still need to plan for mitigation. So the amount of strategic planning the organization need to have will increase drastically. SSP2 is the middle of the road. So these are like 5 SSPs. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just going a bit late. Going a bit fast. So this side, one side of things is the physical climate risk. The other graph is the transition climate risk. So transition climate risk, these are NGFS scenarios, or called as green financing scenarios. So what we are saying is that, let us say, if all the organizations and businesses in the world have agreed for a net zero goal of 2050, then they change the policies, right? They will, like as per SSP1 or SSP2, they will change huge amount of policies. If there are huge amount of change in policies, then the way in which the business has to be conducted will also change drastically. So the transition risk for a business will increase drastically. Transition risks like, let us say, net zero risk. If, let us say, I'm not net zero, I'm not planning for net zero there, but my organization or my country or my sector is going for net zero, then I have a very big transition risk. Similarly, risk of water security, risk of regulations, risk of market. If I say that my pharma, I will only buy from suppliers who are carbon neutral. Some pharma companies have done that. They have put out a kind of a policy saying that we will only buy from suppliers who are net zero from 2030. If they say, and I'm one of the suppliers to that pharma, then I have to make sure that I'm climate neutral or net zero by whatever time they are saying. Otherwise, I will lose business with that specific company. And if similar 4 or 5 major guys from innovators from pharma are doing that, then I'm losing business from major 4 or 5 innovators who are my big ticket items. And that's a big market risk for me. So in a way, we analyze climate risk in scenarios. Like, let us say if the world is following SSP1, let us say the world is following NZE scenario or net zero emission scenario. Then what would be a physical climate risk? What would be my transition climate risk? On the flip side, I can also say that, let us say I assume that the world is following SSP5, and they say that we don't change any policies, and today my policies are whatever at that level, we will go ahead with those policies. And what are my transition risks and what are my physical risks? Any combination of these 5 SSPs and these NGFS scenarios would work. Generally, there is a thumb rule that you do a 2 temporal analysis, 2 decades, and at least 2 scenarios in physical climate risks and 2 scenarios in transition climate risk. Generally, SSP1 today is very, very unlikely. So anything from SSP2 to 5, people choose depending upon what do they want to put ahead. In an ideal case, it would be better if we do the climate risk every 5 years for all the 5 pathways and all the transition scenarios. But then that would take too much amount of effort. And there, a lot of companies are actually coming up with agentic models, predictive models, to build upon the SSP models on how would the organization's climate risk, physical climate risk, would shape up. That's one of the case studies which I'm presenting, actually.
Aditya, maybe if you want to answer Ishita's question, which is in the chat, and maybe due to lack of time, other questions all can reach out to you directly if possible, for if they have any questions. So Ishita has a question that can you differentiate between acute and chronic risks? So I think if you
Yeah, so let me just yeah, so I think Jupiter Intelligence case study, which I was about to talk, will give the answer to Ishita. So acute risks are sudden risks. There is a cyclone, there is a hurricane, there is a heat wave for 2 or 3 days or 1 week. That's an acute calamity which happens suddenly for some time. We can see it, but we don't see it a year before. We see it maybe a couple of weeks or a couple of months before. Those are called acute climate risks. Chronic climate risks are things which are building up over time. Summers are becoming hotter and hotter. That's a chronic risk. Now we have accepted that the average temperature in Hyderabad during summer would be 40 degrees. I live in Hyderabad. Now Hyderabad is actually receiving rains in April mid and in May first week. That generally didn't used to happen. Now we have accepted in Hyderabad and Telangana that this happens. This is happening slowly. And those are called chronic climate risks. Both chronic and acute climate risks, there are across the ways. There are temperature related, wind related, water related, there is biomass related, and all across the place. But generally, in principle, that's the major differentiation between both of them. An acute climate risk can shut down the business for temporarily. A chronic climate risk can increase the risk on assets slowly year. I hope I have answered the question. Sorry.
Thank you, Aditya. And is it possible for you to share the presentation with us? So that because it was a nice presentation, maybe Shita can also have a look and others can also have a look at your presentation.
I'll share it. Actually, until yesterday night, I was totally busy with my meeting, so I couldn't spend a lot of time on this preparation. I will share this presentation. Hopefully, Sagar and Visakha have my coordinates.
Yeah.
Feel free to reach out. I'll be more than happy to give my perspective. And
yeah, and if we can also quickly take a picture of this session and if we can post this on social media, if you have your consent.
yeah, I don't mind. Sorry, I think this session was quite fast or quite rapid with a lot of information flowing here and there. But I would suggest take some time to ruminate. If you have doubts, please do come back.
Yes, you can reach out personally. And if everybody can turn on their camera so that we can click a picture.
Yeah, everyone, please look into the camera. Yeah. Done. Thank you.
Done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sagar. Thank you, Vishaka, for coordinating.
Thank
And
you so much, Aditya.
yeah, any doubts, you know where to reach. Thank you.
Yes,
Bye.
yes. Thank you.